This video is going to focus on the best way to play the Digimon 2020 TCG. This Digimon TCG started out as a balanced and well-designed card game, with its emphasis on player choice and deck building over elements such as deck selection or luck. Many modern TCGs today run into this issue, such as modern Yu-Gi-Oh! For instance, where deck selection or luck determine the majority of the outcome of a game. In the same way that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players now resort to alternate or retro formats to play the game, I've decided that, because the Digimon TCG did not continue forward with its grounded and balanced game design, that an alternative community solution would be the most effective and easy way to create a fun, accessible, and balanced solution to the card game's problems. When I first experimented with different ways to solve the problems of the Digimon TCG, I had originally just said, well, let's just play with cards from Block 1. The block icon, located on the bottom right of the cards, made this easy because it was already printed on the cards. Cards with no block icon were originally included in Block 1 by my definition. The reason why I did this is because the start of Block 2 introduced a lot of decks and mechanics that completely ignored the fundamentals of the card game. This makes it hard for players to play interactively, as the memory system is originally how players interacted with each other. Not only that, but certain decks in BT10 allowed for players to win solely based on luck alone, as they took very little to no player decision or deck building skill to make the deck or to play with it. I don't believe that a format where unskilled players are consistently able to win entirely due to luck is a very good format, and I believe that this outcome in Block 1 is exceptionally rare, due both in part to the game design present in Block 1 and to the amount of turns that are present in a game in Block 1 compared to the amount of turns that are present in the game in Block 2. More turns means more opportunities for player decision to impact a game, and more time for players to strategize, putting more emphasis on player skill and player decision over luck and deck selection. Having played hundreds of Block 1 games with myself and friends, and having the locals that I run LGS events at play Block 1 events for quite some time now, I was able to analyze my observations on the format and hone in further on how to improve it. I believe in having as simple of a rule set as possible, so as to preserve accessibility for new players, and so as not to needlessly complicate a game. Because of this, I believe that the Block 1 format for the DCG, with 2 slight alterations to the rule set, makes for the most balanced possible format while having the least amount of changes. As stated earlier, this format would simply use cards that have the Block 1 icon on them, or that have no block icon at all, and would simply ban 2 additional cards. The first card is X Antibody, the white option card from BT9, and the second is Grand Kawagamon, Promo 25. To many players who played during Block 1, these 2 hits are obvious. On my Discord server, dedicated to the Block 1 format of the Digimon trading card game, I go into further explanation as to why these cards were hit and the implications of hitting them on the format. To sum up said explanations, hitting both of these cards both creates a more casual and experimental air for players to play whatever decks they want, and to help new players get into the game by removing cards and decks that do not interface with the fundamentals of the game. And these 2 bans help create a more competitive format for competitive players, as it forces players to win by player decision and deck building, where these powerful cards otherwise enabled mechanics that would allow players to win through deck selection or luck alone in many circumstances. I don't believe that any more community bans are necessary, but given more empirical data, and possibly having a larger player base playing this format, we might find otherwise. One of the advantages of having a community format is that if we come across an issue, we can fix it. Another major advantage of Block 1, and as I call it with my 2 alterations to the rule set, Block 1 Alter, is that it's a chronologically locked format. There will never be any new cards added to the format, and a player will never have to deal with power creep. And for players seeking novel experiences, and who want to experiment with the format and play lots of decks, they need not worry, because there are plenty of sets available in Block 1 to work with, and because new cards will not power creep the old cards, and because fundamentals of game design are core to winning in Block 1 and Block 1 Alter. Those decks that would otherwise just be fun decks, if built and tuned to correctly, and that would have no shot against the current meta, or even some of the meta from the end of Block 1, actually have a chance of winning. So there is plenty to explore for those kinds of players. Because decks haven't become so heavily focused on archetypization as they had in Block 2 and later, and because games take longer to finish than they do in later blocks, deck building and strategy play a much larger role in Block 1 and Block 1 Alter, giving not only more leeway for creative players to win and build decks that can win, but also creates a better competitive format where more skilled players are more likely to win more often, because winning is so predicated on interacting with the fundamentals of the game's design. Block 1 and Block 1 Alter are formats that emphasize competitiveness as well as creativity, allowing themselves to cater to both competitive players and casual players through different means. Linked in the description is a Discord dedicated to Block 1 and Block 1 Alter, where players can discuss all things Block 1 and Block 1 Alter and play the formats with each other over Discord. We will hold tournaments in the future as well, so that players from around the world who might not have access to paper play can find ways to play the game. I may as well go over some potentially frequently asked questions so as to save people the trouble. The Block 1 format that I've run, and Block 1 Alter for that matter, use the ban list in accordance to when it was released in English with the English sets. This means that we would use the ban list according to how it was just before the Jessamon and Ragnarlordmon structure decks in BT10 were released. This means that Doru Greymon is at 4, and that Calling from the Darkness is also at 4. Because X-Antibody is banned, I believe that Doru Greymon going to 4 is a fair trade, and Calling from the Darkness is not nearly as abusable in Block 1 as it is in Block 2. The reason for using the ban list this way is because when the ban list comes out in Japan, it was already after the problematic cards continued to be problematic. However, for us English players, the ban list would come out just after the set release with the problematic cards, creating a much more balanced format. Cards released in English after the historical period of the Block 1 format or Block 1 Alter are eligible for play during Block 1. Namely, this includes the security rookies, as they have the Block 1 icon on them but were released much later, due to poor distribution scheming by Bandai. I believe this is healthy for the format, as it introduces more flexibility to deck builders, and it provides additional consistency to players by adding the rookie to their hand. Reprint cards from a later era that were originally printed in Block 1, but then have a later block icon on them, are legal for play. Namely, this would include things like the Davis Promo Tamer from the Ragnarlordmon and Jessamon structure decks. Lastly, I say use whatever mulligan rules you like. When I was a tournament organizer at my LGS, Bandai was never very specific as to what mulligan rules to use. And when the new mulligan rules were introduced recently, my LGS elected to use them, as players enjoyed it more, and it was healthier for the game, as it reduced bricking. With that, I hope that we can all enjoy playing this game in a much more balanced and fun way that also provides a better competitive setting.